My in-laws canceled our baby shower because it wasn't worth celebrating yet. But later, they cried when we shut them out forever. I'm Elise. I'm 33, and I live just outside Seattle with my husband Rowan, who's 35. We've been married for 4 years, and we recently had our first baby after years of trying and 2 painful losses. Our journey wasn't easy. Every step felt like walking a tightrope with no net beneath us. When we finally made it past the first trimester with our daughter, we let ourselves breathe. At 30 weeks, we decided it was time to plan a baby shower. It wasn't just about gifts or photos, it was a symbolic celebration, a sign that we were letting hope back in. We'd settled on a warm, simple gathering. Rowan's cousin Marla had offered her house in Bellevue, and we'd begun sending out invitations. I was cautiously excited. Rowan was fully on board. For once, we were both letting ourselves feel joy. Then came the call from my mother-in-law, Beverly. She's always been emotionally distant. The type of woman who offers criticism disguised as advice, and whose default facial expression is somewhere between disapproval and mild confusion. Ronald, her husband, is quieter, he follows her lead more often than not. I've always done my best to keep peace. I smiled at awkward dinners, listened patiently to Beverly's outdated opinions on womanhood, and bit my tongue more times than I can count. So when she called and informed me, calmly, that they were canceling the baby shower, I honestly thought I misunderstood. There's just too much risk, she said, her voice clipped. We think it's premature. It's better to be cautious. We don't want to get too excited. Just in case. She didn't say the word miscarriage, but it hovered there. Unspoken. Heavy. Like she was already mourning our daughter before she was even born. To make it worse, she and Ronald had called Marla before speaking to us. Convinced her to pull the plug. Then they told our extended family that we had canceled it because I was overwhelmed. That was the moment something shifted in me. Before that, I had bent over backward to accommodate them, to give them the benefit of the doubt. But that day, something snapped. It was like a wall went up inside me. When I told Rowan what happened, he was furious. He confronted them, tried to reason with them, but they doubled down. Beverly insisted she was protecting us from disappointment. Ronald parroted something about not getting hopes up too high. I didn't speak to them again for the rest of my pregnancy. Fast forward 8 weeks. I gave birth to a healthy, beautiful girl named Ava Lucille. Her cry was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. All the fear, all the grief from the past, it was worth it. She was worth it. They didn't come to the hospital. They didn't call. Didn't text. No congratulations. Not even a generic, glad everything went well. Just silence. And we didn't chase them. For the first few weeks, we were in a haze of sleepless nights and warm snuggles. I was healing, Rowan was helping as much as he could, and we were slowly finding a rhythm. Ava was everything. We were in a bubble of new parent exhaustion and wonder, and there was no room for bitterness, yet. But then, about 6 weeks postpartum, they showed up. Unannounced. They knocked like they were stopping by for a casual visit, not like people who had completely erased themselves from our lives during the most important moment we'd ever experienced. Rowan opened the door, and I watched from the living room, holding Ava. They didn't even acknowledge me. Beverly smiled like nothing had happened and asked to come in. Ronald looked awkward, like he was hoping someone else would do the talking. Rowan didn't move. He stood in the doorway, blocking their path. You didn't come when she was born, he said. His voice was calm but tight. You didn't even call. Beverly blinked, clearly caught off guard. We didn't want to intrude, she said. We thought you needed space. You made space, Rowan replied. You erased yourselves. She laughed nervously, like she couldn't believe we were upset. Like it was all a big misunderstanding. She doesn't want to see you, Rowan finally said. And honestly, I don't blame her. They left. We didn't talk to them again for months. During that time, we built our new life. Ava started smiling early, then laughing, then babbling. Every milestone was like a tiny spark of light. My parents flew out to visit and meet their granddaughter. They cried when they held her. They brought food, helped us clean, even rocked her to sleep so I could nap. They celebrated with her. And I realized how much I needed that. How much I deserved that. In contrast, Rowan's parents continued their silent treatment. They didn't ask for pictures. Didn't check in. Nothing. Then came Thanksgiving. Ronald sent a vague message, "Hope you're all doing well. We miss you." No mention of Ava. I didn't reply. Christmas passed with more silence. A card arrived in the mail, a family photo of Beverly and Ronald posing stiffly in matching sweaters. Still no mention of Ava. Then in February, Beverly sent me an email. A long one. She wrote about her own pregnancy loss in the 1980s. A story she'd never told us. She said our joy had triggered her anxiety, that she couldn't bring herself to celebrate what felt fragile. "I didn't know how to support you," she wrote. "So I shut down." It was the most human thing she had ever said to me. But it didn't change the past. I didn't write back. Rowan read it and shrugged. She's sorry now because it's convenient. Not because she understands. And I agreed. As Ava approached her first birthday, we started planning a backyard celebration. Small. Homemade cake. A few close friends. My parents flew out again. We didn't invite Ronald or Beverly. They found out anyway. They always do. A few days after the party, they showed up again. This time, Beverly had tears in her eyes. Actual tears. She stood on our front porch holding a gift bag and a card, her shoulders hunched forward like someone carrying shame for the first time in her life. Ronald stood beside her, silent as usual, clutching a small plush elephant. "We want to fix this," she said. I stood at the door with Ava on my hip. She was gnawing on a teething ring, completely oblivious to the drama playing out around her. Beverly continued, her voice breaking. "We made a mistake. We let fear guide us, and we shut you out. We shut her out. And we're so sorry." I didn't say anything right away. Because what do you say to someone who disappeared when it mattered most? When your body was breaking to bring new life into the world, and they decided that wasn't worth celebrating? I let them stand there for a long moment, then quietly stepped onto the porch and gently closed the door behind me, leaving Ava inside with Rowan. "I believe you regret it," I said. "And I don't doubt you feel sorry now. But that doesn't mean you get a clean slate. It doesn't mean you automatically get to be grandparents now." Beverly nodded, eyes glassy. "We'll do anything. Just tell us what to do." I shook my head slowly. "You can't undo what's already done. But you can accept the consequences. That means you won't be part of our lives, not in the way you expect." They stood there quietly, the tension finally settling between us like cold fog. "I'll send photos now and then," I said. "You can write her cards. But visits? Being a regular part of her life? That's not something I can promise. That's something she will have to choose, when she's old enough to understand." Beverly sobbed quietly, covering her mouth. Ronald just stood there, looking small. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. Sad, even. Because I know what it feels like to lose something precious, and they just lost their place in their granddaughter's life. Not out of cruelty, but out of a boundary they crossed and can't uncross. That was almost a year ago now. Ava is too. She's loud, joyful, and wildly independent. She knows the names of every animal in her picture books and insists on brushing her own teeth, though she mostly just chews on the brush. My parents visit often. They dance with her in the kitchen, take her for walks, sing to her in broken Spanish lullabies that I remember from my own childhood. Rowan's parents still send cards. Once in a while, a package arrives. But Ava doesn't know who they are. When she sees their photos, she doesn't recognize them. And I'm okay with that. Because being a grandparent isn't about biology. It's about showing up, consistently, fully, with an open heart. It's about loving a child even when they haven't arrived yet. Even when their heartbeat is just a flicker on a monitor. If you couldn't celebrate them then, you don't get to celebrate them now. We gave them a chance. And they made a choice. So we made one, too. I think what really broke any remaining thread between us and Rowan's parents wasn't just the baby shower or the silence, it was their deep, almost instinctive refusal to believe they'd done anything wrong until the fallout hit them square in the face. After that last doorstep conversation, Beverly did try. I'll give her that. She sent a letter a few weeks later. Handwritten, which was a rarity. The tone was gentler than usual. She wrote about her own childhood, how affection was something earned, not given freely. How loss shaped her. She admitted she hadn't celebrated Ava not because she didn't care, but because she didn't know how to care out loud. It was raw, more personal than anything she'd ever shared before. But even then, it read more like a confession than an apology. And confessions come with the hope of absolution. I wasn't ready to offer that. Rowan read it and didn't say much. He just folded the paper, placed it in Ava's keepsake box, and quietly walked away. From time to time, they'd ask to drop off a gift. A book. A toy. A birthday outfit for Ava's second birthday. And we let them, through the mailbox or front porch. No visits. No face-to-face. We didn't block them entirely. We just kept the boundary like a quiet moat they couldn't cross. One day, Beverly sent a framed photo of Ronald as a child, with a note attached. We thought maybe Ava would like to know where she came from. I stared at it for a while before putting it back in the envelope. I didn't throw it away. I didn't display it either. I tucked it in a drawer where I keep things that don't quite have a place but feel wrong to discard. Old journals. A postcard from a college friend I no longer speak to. A teething ring Ava never used but I can't bring myself to part with. That photo lives there now. My therapist once told me that grief isn't always about death. Sometimes it's about mourning the relationships you wanted but never got. And that's exactly what I've been doing, grieving the idea of a close, joyful extended family for Ava. Because when you picture your child's life, you imagine them surrounded by people who cheer for them. People who light up when they walk into a room. You imagine grandparents who kneel down to their level and scoop them up without hesitation. But I've learned that love has to be active. It has to show up. It can't just linger in old regrets and apologies. Ava doesn't ask about them, because she doesn't know them. They're not part of her day-to-day life. Her world is filled with people who never second-guessed her existence, who were excited before she even arrived. My mom calls every other day, just to hear Ava babble. My dad sends videos of himself reading stories so Ava can watch them before bed. Our neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, knits her little hats for every season. Ava adores her. So while Ronald and Beverly hover on the outskirts, the space they could have filled is no longer empty. Others stepped in. Not out of obligation, but out of genuine love. One time, Rowan asked me, late at night when the house was still and Ava was asleep, if I thought we'd ever let them back in. Like, really back in. I didn't answer right away. I watched the baby monitor instead, Ava curled like a comma in her crib, her chest rising and falling in the soft glow of the nightlight. I don't know, I said finally. But if we ever do, it won't be because they asked. It'll be because she wants to know them. Rowan nodded. That's the kind of man he is. Quietly thoughtful. He wants to believe people can change. I do too. But I've also learned that not everyone changes in time to matter. A few weeks ago, Beverly emailed asking if they could FaceTime with Ava. Not us. Not a family call. Just Ava. That email sat in my inbox for 2 days. I kept opening it, rereading it, and closing it again. They wanted a connection with her, but they still hadn't rebuilt anything with me. Or with Rowan, really. It felt like trying to skip steps. Like applying for a job without going to the interview. I never replied. Rowan didn't ask about it either. I think we both knew that any call like that would be more about easing their guilt than building something real with our daughter. And Ava? She's happy. She doesn't sense the drama orbiting outside our home. She sings songs off key, insists on wearing mismatched socks, and demands that I read The Very Hungry Caterpillar 5 times in a row. She's thriving. She's surrounded by people who show up and stay. Some nights I think about what Ava will ask one day. Because she will. Kids always do. She'll point to a photo, or ask why she only ever sees one set of grandparents, or why someone named Grandma Beverly sends cards but never visits. And I'll have to answer her. Not out of spite. Not with bitterness. But with truth. Because she deserves that. Just like she deserves a life filled with people who never needed convincing to love her. There's something strange about watching a family try to earn a place they never thought they'd have to fight for. That's what it's become now, Ronald and Beverly trying to claw their way back into relevance, hoping time will smooth over the sharp edges they left behind. But time hasn't made us forget. If anything, it's clarified what matters, and who chose to matter when it counted. A couple of weeks after the unanswered FaceTime request, Beverly sent a birthday package. Ava had just turned 2. Inside was a carefully folded pink dress, a small silver bracelet with her name engraved, and a card. Handwritten. No calligraphy. No flowery message. Just, "We love you even though we weren't there. We hope one day you'll know us. Grandma Beverly and Grandpa Ronald." I sat with that card in my hands for a long time. My emotions shifted like waves, first irritation, then guilt, then something resembling grief. Again. Because that sentence said it all, even though we weren't there. That's the piece they still don't fully get. They weren't there. Not during the ultrasounds. Not when I couldn't sleep from anxiety after feeling no movement for a day. Not when I cried in the car because I saw a baby dress in a shop window and thought it might jinx everything. Not when I delivered her. Not when I bled so badly post-delivery I had to go back to the ER. Not when I sat in the rocking chair at 3 a.m. sobbing because Ava wouldn't latch and I felt like a failure. They weren't there. So now, when they send packages and cards, when they try to push their way in through the cracks of normal life, it just feels unearned. Late. Like a letter arriving after the funeral. I ended up putting the bracelet in Ava's memory box. I didn't show it to her. Not yet. Maybe one day, when she's old enough to understand the tangled mess that is family. A week after her birthday, we took Ava to the Woodland Park Zoo. She wore a sun hat too big for her head, clutching a stuffed giraffe my mother gave her. She squealed at the meerkats, pointed wide-eyed at the elephants, and fell asleep halfway through the penguin exhibit. It was one of those perfect days, not because everything went smoothly, but because it was real. And because we were present. All in. We stopped for ice cream on the way home, Rowan and I splitting a cup while Ava snored softly in the back seat. That's when Rowan brought it up again. Should we let them send a video? Just a little one? Ava wouldn't know who they are, but maybe it's something. He wasn't pushing. Just floating the thought, like he often did when he wanted to test the waters without causing a wave. I took a spoonful of his Rocky Road and sat with it in my mouth a moment longer than necessary. Would it make a difference for her? I asked. Or would it just make them feel better? He sighed. Probably the second one. We left it at that. It wasn't about revenge. It never was. But part of me also knew that letting them back in too soon would send the wrong message. That all they had to do was wait us out, and eventually, we'd fold. And if we folded once, they'd never take our boundaries seriously again. Sometimes, boundaries don't feel like big, dramatic decisions. They feel like a dozen quiet choices you make every day. Not picking up the phone. Not replying to a text. Not correcting them when they get something wrong in the card they sent. Not reopening a door you've worked so hard to close for your own peace. There was a day, maybe 6 months after Ava's second birthday, when Ronald reached out directly. A rare thing. He sent a short message: "Elise, I know we've made a mess of things. I know Beverly gets most of the attention, but I was there too, and I didn't speak up. I should have. I'm sorry. I don't expect anything back. Just wanted to say it." It threw me for a loop. Not because it made me emotional, but because it didn't. I read it. I believed it. I appreciated it. But it didn't change anything. That part surprised me. It was honest. Maybe the most honest either of them had been. But it didn't heal what had already been fractured. I never replied. And I think, in some small way, that was its own message. Months passed. Ava continued to grow, soaking up language and independence like a sponge. She started forming little routines, insisting on brushing her own teeth, demanding to pick her own socks, calling our cat by the wrong name and refusing to be corrected. She was whole. She was loved. She was enough. And not once, not ever, did she mention the names of the people who decided she wasn't worth celebrating. It was sometime in early spring, when the cherry blossoms had just started blooming in the city, that we ran into Ronald and Beverly by complete accident. We were at Green Lake, one of our favorite spots to walk with Ava. She loves the ducks, the boats, and the snack cart with those overpriced soft pretzels that always leave her covered in salt and mustard. It was a Saturday morning, and the place was packed. We were near the North Shore Loop when I spotted them first. They were walking toward us slowly, arms linked like people who were pretending not to see what was coming straight at them. Beverly was wearing that same beige windbreaker she always wore to events, the one with a floral scarf she draped too tightly around her neck. Ronald looked older, thinner maybe, or just heavier in the eyes. I didn't have time to react or steer away. Ava was already halfway through a strawberry yogurt tube and chanting, "Ducky. Ducky," like it was a rally cry. They stopped just a few feet away, looking stunned. "Elise," Beverly said, almost breathless. "And Rowan." "Oh. And this must be Ava." Ava looked up briefly, more interested in smearing yogurt on her sleeve than whatever adult tension was in the air. Neither of us said anything at first. Rowan's posture stiffened beside me, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head. Do we talk? Do we smile? Do we walk away? It was Beverly who finally took a tentative step forward, a nervous smile playing on her face. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "Really?" I nodded. "She is." Ronald gave a small, awkward wave toward Ava, who blinked and stared at them like she might if she were meeting any random stranger for the first time. There was a long, strange silence. "We didn't know you'd be here," Ronald said, rubbing the back of his neck. "We come almost every weekend," Rowan said. "It's her favorite place." Beverly nodded too quickly, too eagerly. Maybe we could join sometime? Just a short walk. No pressure. Just to see her?" I didn't answer. I looked at Ava, now trying to pick petals off the grass. She had no idea the weight of what was happening right then. To her, they were just people in her periphery. She didn't shrink back or smile. Just existed in her own little toddler world. Rowan cleared his throat. "It's not really up to us," he said carefully. "It's about what's best for Ava." The way Beverly's face fell, like she expected that excuse but still hoped to dodge it, told me they had been having this same conversation in their heads for a long time. "We understand," Ronald said before she could speak again. "We just didn't want to keep pretending we weren't trying." He sounded tired. Not angry. Not even desperate. Just tired. And I realized at that moment that maybe they had been hurting too. Maybe they thought we'd eventually just let time soften everything. But time didn't fix it. Time just gave it shape. They didn't linger. Beverly said, "It was good to see you," and Ronald gave a polite nod. Then they kept walking, slowly, their footsteps fading behind us. We sat on a bench after that. Ava climbed into my lap and asked for a granola bar. Rowan opened it for her and handed it over wordlessly. Neither of us mentioned what just happened. We didn't have to. It hung in the air between us like Seattle mist, light, ever-present, and impossible to ignore. That night, when we were getting Ava ready for bed, she paused while brushing her teeth and looked up at me. "Who were those people with the jackets?" she asked, her voice muffled around the toothbrush. I froze. Rowan looked over from folding laundry. I swallowed. "They're people we used to know," I said slowly. "People who didn't come around when you were little." Ava thought about that for a second, then shrugged and went back to brushing. That was it. That was all she needed. The answer was enough, for now. Later, after she'd fallen asleep, Rowan came and sat next to me on the couch. He pulled his feet up under him and stared out the window into the dark. "You think we did the right thing?" he asked softly. I didn't answer right away. I thought about that day at the lake. About the card. The bracelet. The letters. The silence. "I think we did the best thing," I said. "For her. And maybe even for us. Because what do you do when people who should have been your biggest supporters become your greatest source of pain? You protect your peace. You draw the line. And then you teach your daughter how to do the same. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's family." About 2 months after that awkward encounter at Green Lake, Beverly reached out again, this time through a formal letter, typed, addressed to Rowan and me, and mailed to our home. No cutesy grandma sign-off, no baby stickers or glittery font on the envelope. Just our names in bold print like a business letter. She opened with a familiar sentiment: "We've made mistakes." She called herself a product of a different time and claimed that fear, not malice, had driven her decisions. She talked about how deeply they regretted missing Ava's birth, the baby shower, the milestones. It read as sincere, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still centered around them. Their guilt. Their feelings. Their wishes. At the end of the letter, she included something unexpected. A check. $25,000. It was made out to Ava. No explanation. Just a note at the bottom that said, "For her future." Since we failed to be there for her in the past. At first, I laughed. Actually laughed, out loud, with this strange, dry disbelief. It was so on brand. Instead of accountability, they defaulted to money. I showed the letter to Rowan, who raised an eyebrow and said, "That's new." We didn't touch the check. I tucked it in a folder and slid it into the cabinet with our tax paperwork. I didn't rip it up. But I didn't deposit it either. And that's when the idea started forming. It wasn't about revenge in the classic sense. I didn't want to hurt them or retaliate. But I did want them to feel the weight of their choices. I wanted them to know that some doors, once closed, don't open the same way again. So I made a plan. We started posting more about Ava, not in excess, but enough. Little milestones: her 3rd birthday party, her first time on a tricycle, the painting she made in daycare that looked like a squashed octopus but she was so proud of. Rowan and I carefully curated what we shared. Bright smiles, messy joy, life in full color. We blocked Beverly and Ronald from seeing any of it directly, of course. But we knew they still followed. Through mutuals. Through Marla. Through anyone they could reach. They saw what they were missing, not because we rubbed it in, but because we lived fully without them. A few weeks later, we got a group email from Beverly addressed to the family circle. She was organizing a holiday gathering and hoped we'd attend. I stared at it for a long time before replying simply, "We won't be coming. Please don't include us in future invitations." She replied with one sentence. "We just want to be part of her life." And that was the moment I realized the power had shifted. They used to be the gatekeepers of family approval. The elders. The ones who expected others to fold, to placate, to compromise. But now? They were the ones on the outside, knocking. And I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was calm. Because revenge, for me, didn't come in the form of cutting them down. It came in the form of living well without them. Raising Ava in a warm, joyful home. Showing her what love looks like, not love that demands, or guilt trips, or only shows up when it's safe. But real love. Love that celebrates her before she's done anything. Love that doesn't need proof to exist. One sunny afternoon, Ava and I were in the yard. She was barefoot in the grass, painting a birdhouse with my dad, who had come to visit again. Her curls were wild, her hands streaked with purple paint. My mom was inside, cooking arroz con pollo, humming old songs from her childhood. I stepped back for a moment and just took it in. This was my revenge. Not silence. Not confrontation. Just this, my daughter growing up in a life where she is wanted, celebrated, and safe. And every smile we shared was another chapter Ronald and Beverly would never be part of, not because we were cruel, but because they made a choice long ago, and we finally made ours. The check is still in the folder. Maybe one day, when Ava turns 18, I'll let her decide what to do with it. She'll know the story by then. The whole truth. She'll understand that money can't buy back time. That love is shown, not just said. That people are responsible for how they show up, or how they don't. And if she wants to cash it? Well, that'll be her choice. Because that's the other part of our quiet revenge, we're raising her to know her worth. From the start. Without question. They'll never get to rewrite their part in her story. But we will always know the pages they never earned. And that's enough.